The approximate age of an egg can be determined by placing it in a bowl of water. Two eggs of different ages are placed in water and come to rest as shown. The internal structure of an egg is shown below. A student searched on the internet to find the reasons why old eggs float. He found the following statements on different websites. The first statement is old eggs float because as the egg ages, it starts to decompose. As it decomposes, gases are produced that escape through the eggshell. The second statement is as the egg ages, air enters the egg through the eggshell and increases the size of the air cell. The larger air cell acts as a flotation device and hence old eggs float. We have to assess which of these two statements is correct. Now, as you can see, this question is from upthrust and flotation. So what I will do is I will take some time and I will explain the concept of flotation and sinking in quite some detail because we will be solving some other questions on flotation and sinking. So I'll explain it right here at the beginning. Before we start, most of the students are taught that something sinks because it is more dense than water and something floats because it is less than the density of the object is less than the density of the water. So that's why it will float. Forget about this thing. It will just confuse you because in a question like this, if you start thinking in terms of density of the egg, you'll not be able to answer this question correctly. So what we will do is we will think in terms of the net force acting on objects. Okay, so if this object placed in water, we have two forces acting on this object. We have weight of the object acting downwards, which is just mg, and we have upthrust, which is acting upwards. Now, all that you need to understand is that if upthrust force is greater than weight, then the object will float. If, on the other hand, weight is greater than the upthrust, then the object will sink. Now, the question is, how do we calculate this upthrust? For upthrust, you have to remember that upthrust is just equal to weight of the fluid which is displaced. So this is the starting point, weight of fluid displaced. Because weight is a force, upthrust is a force, so upthrust is just equal to weight of the fluid which is displaced. How can we calculate weight of the fluid? Well, weight of the fluid will be mass of the fluid which is displaced times acceleration due to gravity. Okay, now in order to calculate weight of the fluid, we need mass of the fluid. How can we find mass of the fluid? For this, we need the equation of density. Since density is mass per unit volume, if you rearrange this equation for mass, you will get mass of the fluid is just equal to density of the fluid times volume of the fluid. Okay, now at this point, it is very important to understand that volume of the fluid, well, density of the fluid is just constant, right? But volume of the fluid, which will be displaced, it will always be equal to volume of the object. So, for example, if you have a cube that has a volume of, let's say, 1 meter cube, the amount of fluid that can be filled inside this cube will be 1 cubic meter. And hence, if you drop this in, let's say, water, this cube will displace the same amount of water that it can contain. So the volume of the object will always be equal to the volume of the fluid displaced. So once you know volume of the fluid displaced, you can just multiply it with density of the fluid to find mass of the fluid displaced. Once you have mass of the fluid displaced, you can find weight of the fluid. Once you have weight of the fluid, you can calculate upthrust. Now, at this point, it may look like this is getting more complex, and if we just stick with more dense will sink, less dense will float. If we stick with this concept, it is more easy, but it's not. You'll see that in the upcoming questions, if you just think in terms of density, you will not be able to answer most of the questions. And even this question, you cannot answer it in terms of density. Now, after explaining this whole concept, now answer this question, and we will think in terms of the net force. The first statement is old eggs float because as the egg ages, it starts to decompose. As it decomposes, eggs are produced that escape through the eggshell. Okay, so something is getting out of the egg, right? We have air escaping the egg. So if something is going out of the egg, what will happen to weight? Weight of the egg will decrease. So weight is going down, or let me write decrease. Weight will decrease. And what about upthrust? Do you think that when air escapes the egg, the weight of the egg decreases? Upthrust will change. Let's see. Well, upthrust is weight of the fluid displaced, which is mass of the fluid, and mass of the fluid depends on volume of the fluid, and volume of the fluid is just volume of the object, right? So even though air is escaping the egg, volume of the egg is not changing. that means that volume of the fluid which is displaced will also not change. When volume of the fluid will not change, mass of the fluid displaced will not change. If mass of the fluid displaced will not change, then weight of the fluid displaced will not change, and hence upthrust force will remain constant, right? It doesn't matter if air escapes the egg, or in the next question we will see even if the air enters the egg, upthrust will still be constant. So we have established that as the result of first statement, weight will decrease and upthrust is constant. So the net force on this object will be upwards because upthrust is the same and weight has decreased. So the net force will be upwards. This is net direction of the force. Now, what about the second statement? I'll change color. In the second statement, as the egg ages, air enters the egg through the eggshell and increases the size of the air cell. Okay, in the second statement, we have something entering the egg, and as a result, weight of the egg will increase. Okay, weight of the egg will increase, but upthrust, as I've already mentioned, that upthrust does not depend on mass of the egg. It only depends on volume of the object. Since volume is not changing, upthrust will remain constant. But in this case, since weight has increased, the net force on the object will be downwards. So the object will sink. The question was, why old eggs float? So it must be the first statement. The first statement must be correct because as a result of first statement, the weight has decreased and the upthrust force has increased and the net force is upward, so it will float. So first statement is correct. Now you will see we will use the same concept in other questions to find how objects float and why do they sink, and it will be very easy to answer these questions.